Money FM 89.3, the best of the afternoon update.
Money FM 89.3, you're with Lynn Lee on the afternoon update. Now, global supply chain management, it's the backbone of the modern economy in today's interconnected world. Amid ongoing shifts in global supply chains, we are seeing more and more companies leveraging Southeast Asia and Singapore to diversify supply chain networks within Asia. Of course, more recently, U.S. President Donald Trump has pledged to go ahead with the 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods, and the ground being set for his administration's relationship with China. 10% U.S. tariffs have been met with retaliatory measures on U.S. coal, LNG, and agricultural machinery, among other developments. The landscape seems likely to continue to change often and rapidly, which makes you wonder, what could some of the probable effects on multinational corporations and their supply chains be, especially for us here in Singapore and Asia? Richard Butler, VP and Head of APAC Risk and Research at Dow Jones, joins me now to discuss the key risks shaping the supply chain management sector. Welcome, Richard.
Thanks, Lynn Lee. Thank you for having me on.
Great to have you on Money FM 89.3 live in the studio with us today. Richard, you're based in Sydney and you've been in this role for 17 years. What can you tell us about what's going on in the world of supply chain?
Quite a lot. I think if you asked me what was going on 17 years ago, my answer would be very different to this. I think the world in Asia and the world in general is moving at such a fast pace that I think our customers are really trying to get to grips with how to stay on top of all these things. The biggest supply chain risks, I think, facing customers in Asia is the geopolitical risks. Mm-hmm. There's the US and China who are having a trade war. There's the Russian war at the moment. There's tariffs that are affecting supply chains. And I think that is a ongoing headache for companies in terms of how to deal with it, how to stay on top of these changes and what to do moving forward in terms of, like you're asking me, how to predict the future. It's really very hard to do that. On top of that, there's the export controls. It's a very technical issue for our companies, but we have the chip war. They're limiting sending chips to certain countries to try and limit their advancement in AI tools. And that, I don't think, has proven to work with DeepSeek's announcement recently. And you could see the drop in American share prices. I think it's shown that their advantage was not as great as I think it was. So is that chip war effective? We're not sure. But export controls do exist. And an area that we attended a conference yesterday with 100 compliance managers, and it was very interesting to hear their views and their concerns. And one area that they mentioned was dual-use goods, which is a list that is issued by various different countries, including a Uber national Wassenaar agreement. 48 different countries signed it. Every year they go to the Wassenaar town in the Netherlands and they agree a list of items that are dual use. An example would be a drone. I could buy a drone to take photographs, and that's okay, but you cannot ship a drone to a restricted country like Russia because they might use it in a war. So there's dual-use goods that are being limited, and they're putting pressure on customers saying that you cannot ship these goods to these countries. So corporates have to screen their goods and make sure that they know where their goods are going. Banks also, if they're financing these goods and shipments, so trade finance, they need to know what's in that container on the ship. If it is drones and it's going for Russia, they're not allowed to finance that. That would be breaking sanctions and dual-use goods, and they would get a hefty fine. These fines, I think you can see, they're big. They in the millions and billions, and they immediately have a share price effect on the company. Typically with AML, anti-money laundering and financial fines, it's affected banks, but you can see corporates falling foul of that as well. And then I think the last risk, supply chain risk, is the issue with risk identification. So companies, how are they staying on top of these geopolitical changes? How are they looking for dual-use goods? How are they making sure that they're staying on top of the regulations? That's an issue. If they cannot identify the risks, they cannot mitigate the risks. And I think that's a concern as well.
Richard, I can only imagine the level of complexity. We're only talking about one aspect of it when you were mentioning the dual-use goods. From where you stand, what do you think would be the biggest challenge currently facing supply chain management in this region?
I think there's quite a few challenges. With the new Trump 2.0 administration coming in, we can see that he has signed 70 executive orders in his first few days. So he's been well prepared and he's really starting very fast. This has led to a lot of uncertainty. I think this uncertainty has led to increased opportunities in Southeast Asia. You will see outside of Singapore, you'll see a lot of investment going into Thailand, going into Vietnam as people try and diversify their supply chain to try and mitigate some of these risks. And I think you will see a lot of that coming into the Southeast Asia region. Broadly speaking, though, for Singapore, I think tariffs and supply chain issues ultimately do increase the burden on companies. The effect for Singaporeans really in the long run will mean that innovation and technology slows down as they slow the transportation of chips that will help that. Tariffs are passed on to the consumers, a lot of economists say. And once you bring in a tariff, it's very hard to take it off again. So ultimately, Singaporean users will probably be paying more for goods and services. Technology and advancement will be slowed as a result of these. So the view on tariffs, I feel, is not necessarily good for the consumers in Singapore, but it is a political tool that's being used quite widely at the moment.
Okay, in terms of supply chain, we often hear about the term deglobalization or regional supply chain reshoring. What are your thoughts around that? Do you think there will be a shift toward more localized supply chains in the APAC region? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of this approach?
Yeah, I do. I think given the US focus on China, I think in Southeast Asia there's a great opportunity for the market to work and to trade with each other more closely. And this does lead to many opportunities. However, if they do actually stick together remains to be seen, because they will probably be forced to take a side, and that could lead to some issues there. So, yeah, I think it's a very interesting time, yeah.
Okay. We talked quite a bit about geopolitical risks. What about unexpected disruptions like natural disasters, pandemics, and cyber attacks? What can you tell us about such risks and perhaps some of the strategies to mitigate such risks?
Yeah, well, such risks and like natural disasters, it's very hard to predict, and they do happen. What can they do to mitigate these things? I think it's, with regard to your supply chain, if you have one supplier in one market, it means all your risk is tied to that. So I think a lot of people are looking to diversify their supply chain. So they will move it around different countries and different regions, and I think that's probably one of the best things to do. I think for companies to offset these risks, it's very important to have a really robust compliance program in place. This compliance program, the risk and compliance program, will help them adhere to various regulations, but it's also, they're meant to keep an eye on the future and look at different scenarios. So you will find a lot of companies doing different scenario planning. So if this happens, then what happens this? What if this happens? And it's very important for companies to play out scenario planning. The Russian invasion of Ukraine was very interesting. A lot of companies had to exit from Russia, and that was very unpredicted. So if that happens again, people need to be prepared. So a robust compliance program is important, scenario planning as well, and also relying on the experts. I think you need to talk to the geopolitical experts as well and make sure that you have your finger on the pulse, I think. But if you're in a small industry here, at the conference I attended yesterday with 100 compliance managers talking about these similar risks, it was a great way to get some feedback. And a compliance officer from a large bank was noting that he had the benefit of a network. If Trump announced, for example, that he's not pursuing the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act anymore, my friend who I met yesterday, he said he could ring his American colleagues and say, hey, what's this? And get an inside view. It's much harder for people who are in smaller industries and smaller companies in the region. So I think it's good to go to these events. It's good to network, build up your network, because it's such a changing time. There's so much turmoil. It's hard for you to understand everything, and you need to test the waters with other professionals. So having a good network to talk to is important as well.
Okay. Shifting gears a little bit, Richard, we talk a lot about technology in most of our conversations on Money FM 89.3. So how is technology such as AI, data analytics, blockchain transforming the way companies in the APAC region manage their supply chains?
Yeah. I'm surprised it took you so long to mention AI. It's top of every conversation that I have, and it's the top thing that people want to talk about. Interestingly, I think the feedback from industry experts is that AI is a little bit away from helping them the reality of their job. AI seems to be more focused on companies who are trying to look for efficiencies or innovation. However, regulators like the EU and US lawmakers have stressed that people do need to start embedding AI into their compliance programs. So the regulators are forcing this behavior, and you will see that adoption slowly coming. So our Dow Jones Risk and Research company, we leverage AI extensively, but we still need the human element included. I think that is what you see across banks and corporates. They are trusting AI, but they are ensuring that they have authentic intelligence or intelligent people sitting on top of that as well.
Okay, picking up on that, could you share perhaps some examples of companies using innovative tools to enhance supply chain resilience?
Yeah, so the ability to monitor in real time media for any adverse effects to your supply chain. So referring back to my robust compliance company should have a robust compliance program. And part of that is what banks call KYC, or Know Your Customer. In this case, it's Know Your Third Parties. So for a corporation, it's not just customers, it's everyone they deal with. There are AI tools that will allow them upload all their third parties against a certain filters of negative issues that are an issue to them, of key concern to them, and they can monitor global media in real time, both paid media sources and open sources as well. So previously, banks and corporations would have relied on structured data or profiles that companies like ourselves can send them of high-risk individuals, but now they have the ability to move more freely and identify risks in a much quicker time. So AI can have real-life, real-time media monitoring. You can also use it to, detect sort of sentiment for credit ratings as well. So we see people taking AI to sit over a large volume of news to pick out the sentiment and work out early signals for credit issues within companies as well.
Interesting. And, we're running out of time, but before I let you go, I know you mentioned earlier that it's difficult to predict trends, but looking forward, what do you foresee shaping the future of supply chain management in the APAC region, perhaps in the next 5 to 10 years? Looking into your crystal ball.
Yeah, I did not bring my crystal ball today. I wish I did. It's very hard to predict, and I think the last few years have been so unpredictable. I think my only prediction is that we will get more of the same. I think companies will look to build resilience to make sure that they can deal with these changes, and I think scenario planning helps. I think robust compliance programs help. I think staff training helps as well. But I think companies need to be nimble, and they need to be able to pivot. They need to be able to move. They need to be able to diversify. They need to explore new markets as well. But most importantly, I think companies and the people in those companies need to stay on top of the news. So trying to work out what the news headline is, but what the impact of that is for you and your company in that region is very important. So staying on top of the news and listening to Money FM and making sure you get the best news, I think that's probably
out of
best
Dow Jones as well.
Absolutely, yes.
All right. Thank you so much for your insights today, Richard. Appreciate your time and appreciate you coming to our studio. He is Richard Butler, VP and Head of APAC Risk and Research at Dow Jones.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.